Five, four, three, two, one. What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Ralph Hanna. And guys, wait a minute, we're not on a podcast. We're not recording. Well, we are recording, but we're doing a live stream. Yes, after the 2026 World Cup draw, we decided to do a live stream after we finally found out the rivals for Paraguay in the 2026 World Cup. Obviously, it was a big day in Washington, D.C. You know, a lot of people coming to the nation's capital as Paraguay and obviously other nations around the world are figuring out their fate for the 2026 World Cup that will happen next summer here in the United States. I'm happy to be with obviously my two great co-hosts in Fede and Ralph. And yeah, we're going to talk about Paraguay's group because it is an interesting one. And obviously, there was a lot of things to really talk about in this group because obviously we are an English speaking group uh, together, of course, and we'll get a lot of English speaking countries that will be facing at this World Cup. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about other things going on that kind of catch our eye. But yeah, before we get into the actual group itself, let's go to, I guess, someone that is going to be fielding maybe a few people that are coming to Houston, to Texas as a whole in the next few months. Ralph, how are you? And I guess, you know, your immediate reaction to just the pomp and circumstance of everything. And of course, you know, what we'll talk about with the groups that we've seen.
Yeah, hi guys. Hi everybody. This is our first live. We're checking it out, seeing how it goes. Yeah, people are already asking like what games are in Houston, and of course we don't know until tomorrow. But the good thing is for Paraguay, we do know where they're going to play because they got drawn against the hosts, United States, which it's funny because Alfaro was saying, he was really saying yesterday he didn't want to face Mexico. That was his one thing. He was like, he doesn't want to go to the altitude. He's worried about the logistics or this kind of thing. So he avoided that. But he gets another host in the United States. And obviously, it's a game we've just lost, what, a month? It was a month ago today, pretty much, or a few weeks ago, that we lost to the US in Pennsylvania. So, I mean, now we got to go face Pochettino again, this time in LA, and see what we can do. But yeah, it was an exciting draw. I mean, at the time we were seeing like Paraguay were meant to get put in one group and then they didn't, so then they ended up there, or teams were being moved, and so you weren't sure like who your rival was going to be. And even now, we're still waiting on that final team, right? The European side that are going to make up the group. But I don't know about you guys. I mean, overall, I'm really pleased that they don't have too much travel to do. That was like one big thing that I think can be a big advantage. But then the teams are maybe not as easy as you would expect, even though we're missing the big European teams. But I think it could still be tricky that US, Australia, and then possibly Turkey, Romania, even Slovakia, who's the last team Paraguay beat outright. Yep, that's the last team they beat outright to the World Cup back in 2010. So I don't know. Overall, I'm quite excited about it. I'm quietly confident we'll be good to go through the group, but maybe not plain sailing. Don't know what you guys are thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I'll go to Fede first actually, because obviously he was there in Paraguay. I'm sure so many people in the country were so expectant on this day. You know, first time in 16 years that Paraguay can participate at a World Cup, and so everyone was really glued. And I'm sure everyone was talking about during the last few days of like what group that they can get. You know, players also talking about playing against people like Cristiano Ronaldo, like with Gustavo Gomez, or playing against Spain or England, like other people have been talking about. And you know, obviously the United States was always a an option because obviously that would have been one of the scenarios for them. But yeah, it feels such a like an interesting game that we're gonna get, you know, three interesting games, of course. But yeah, Fede, I guess I'll go to you. Your reaction to this group, and then of course, you know, what people have been saying in Paraguay, you know, just your sort of feel of what's the people are saying, and just kind of a that sort of thing.
Hi, Roberto. Hi, Rob. Hi, to everyone listening. Hi, to everyone there on the other side of this live that we're doing for the first time. Special day calls for a special coverage, right? I mean, how good did it feel to see Paraguay again there in a World Cup draw after so many years, a new draw with many teams, a World Cup that's been expanded, and it was kind of a weird draw from that side because you thought, okay, this team is going to go on this group, and then no, they changed it again, and you even saw some faces there during the ceremony of the guys. I don't think really getting it, I'm talking about players. I'm talking about, even some coaches thinking, okay, I'm gonna face this one. Oh no, wait a second. I don't think we're gonna face that one. We gotta wait a bit more. Even Ferdinand was a bit lost there. I don't know. It was kind of a weird ceremony, but the whole thing was. I think even divided in two parts, right? The big ceremony in the beginning, which was even longer than an hour, and then the draw finally happening, which is what we were all waiting for. A couple of good things along the way, like Lauren Hill singing, but too much Infantino for my
You didn't
taste.
like the
But
YMCA, you didn't like the village people and all that?
no, that ending was kind of weird. I mean, 2025, where I didn't look like 1970s, but I don't know.
Yeah, I was about to say.
It kind of felt like a rich or millionaire's birthday party for a second there. But I would just leave it at that. Let's talk about football. Let's talk about Paraguay. Let's talk about the draw. Let's talk about our possibilities. And I'm feeling good, guys. I mean, at a certain point, you were thinking, hey, we can get even two Europeans in our group, and it ended up going the right way, I believe. Facing the strongest team right away, facing the USA, which were in pot one. And, we skipped Spain, we skipped France. We might see them later on in the tournament, but not in the group phase. It will be Australia as of right now, and at least the US as we wait for that third opponent. It would actually be our second game that we're going to face in the World Cup. But everybody's talking about facing the USA, going up against the host. The first game, we just faced them in a friendly. It wasn't that friendly, and now we're going to go up against them to start off the World Cup in 2026. Can't wait for it, guys.
Yeah, and then maybe I'm so excited I couldn't even talk. No, I think that's the thing. I think now me assessing it a bit quickly, I think the first thing, of course, that I think we all talked about was sort of the logistics, and certainly a lot of people maybe that are based here in the Northeast or even the South maybe are a bit disappointed that they have to travel. But for the Paraguayans that are based in California, in the Bay Area or in LA, they are living it. They are enjoying it. Now, prices might be a bit different when it comes to tickets, but that's a whole different story to talk about. But yeah, I think from the football perspective, Ralph, I'll go to you. I think you can really say that from my personal opinion, I think it is an accessible group, and rightly so, because you have to realize that one, it could have been worse, where Paraguay could have gotten two Europeans. You're getting essentially two teams that are of similar quality. I think, if I'm not mistaken, if you add in sort of the FIFA rankings or the ELO rankings or whatever, they're very close. They're very close in terms of like the ranking as a whole. I'll just try to see if I can look it up quickly as I talk. But like these are teams, and even for the European teams that we can get, they're very much of the same quality. The US before they were 14th in this draw. You have Australia who are 26th and Paraguay who are 39. So, a level of separation, but not like a huge level of separation in comparison to, other groups like Brazil who have to play Haiti, 80 or 84th, and Brazil are 5th or something like that, as an example. But I
Yeah.
think you have a lot of sort of similar teams, and I think the same could be said for whatever the European team will get, be it Turkey, be it, Romania, Slovakia, Kosovo. I'm just looking here real quick. Turkey 25th in the world. Romania are 47th in the world, so they're actually worse than Paraguay in the rankings. Slovakia 45th, and then Kosovo, obviously, who are the minnows in this, they're 80th. So I think also the good impression is that you get a lot of these teams that are pretty much similar to Paraguay in terms of quality. And so I think not only does this make this an accessible group for Paraguay, I think it also makes it open for any of these teams. I think, the familiarity that the United States had with Paraguay literally like less than 3 months ago, 3 weeks ago, sorry, I think allows that, for someone like Alfaro, it's like, great, we know these guys. These are something that we can learn from. And then obviously it's studying what Australia do, what they, are doing with this manager, Tony Popovich. And then with the Europeans, I'm sure a lot of Paraguayans, like maybe haven't been watching the European qualifiers, but once March 26th happens, when we have Turkey, Romania, and Slovakia, Kosovo, I'm sure a lot of people will be trying to watch both games because those are potentially new rivals. But yeah, I personally think I was like, it looks sounded tricky, but on the broader stand and, hearing from people, seeing reactions, seeing these sort of like simulations and stuff. I think people really feel that Paraguay have a good chance of qualifying out of this group.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head with the rankings. So if assuming the highest ranking team qualifies, which would be Turkey, then Paraguay is actually the lowest ranked at 39, and then US is the highest at 15. It's like a very small range of difference. So like you say, it's really open, I think, for almost everybody. Of course, US have the home advantage, so that's going to be very big for them. But you kind of feel that okay, when you don't have, let's say, a game you should win, like for example, in some groups you do have the lower ranked teams from pot four, where you're just assuming you should come off and win that game. We don't have that. But then you look at all three matches and you think probably we could get through all three matches without losing, is another way to think about it. I mean, the opening match is US is going to be such a huge one because obviously for the US themselves hosting the World Cup, having that opening game in the most modern stadium maybe in the world. Well, not in the world because maybe there's some that are being built, but
Yeah.
the most modern one at the World Cup, and it's going to be such a huge moment. It's one of the biggest cities in the world where all the kind of the fame and everything of Los Angeles. So I think that's going to be a huge occasion. And we've seen Paraguay in openings in huge occasions. They had to play against Italy, defending champions last time, and they got the draw. They had to play against England in 2006. They did lose, but it was a really close game. I thought Paraguay were probably better that day. So I mean, it's one of those things where I feel Alfaro can get his team up for the occasion very easily in this match. Something maybe he couldn't do in the friendly. In the friendly, there was what, 17,000 people. They were mostly Paraguayans, funnily enough, and it was maybe harder to generate some of that sense of occasion. So I think in a way that plays into Paraguay's favor. And then you've got the Australia game, which is interesting. I didn't realize. I was researching today. Australia's got like a huge community in San Francisco, so there actually could be a much more a home crowd for Australia than we might expect. And then they got the game against the European team, which yeah, like I mean, we could assume Turkey are the highest ranking, but of course we can't assume that they will qualify. But let's say it is somebody like Turkey. Again, it's a game you think Paraguay could avoid defeat. And so really it's in those three matches, you're just looking at which is the one they can like snatch the win, right? And get the clean sheet, maybe get the set piece goal. Because with that one win, and assuming they avoid defeat in the others, they're doing really well to get through the group.
Yeah, right away, guys. I mean, the feeling that I have and listening to Coach Alfaro right away after the draw, it's pretty even, spread out in this group at least. But someone's gonna have to stand out. Someone's gonna have to start winning. Hopefully, it is us right away in that first game to set the tone. Why not of this group and put the pressure on the home team, right? I mean, most of the matches of this World Cup will be played in the U.S. I kind of saw that in the last game that we played against them, that friendly, that they were kind of under that pressure that they really needed to show off. They really needed to stand out in the game at home. And they kind of took over from that first play, right? And I don't think that's going to happen in that World Cup game. I think we're going to go in with a totally different attitude. So a lot of Americans, I think they saw the real Paraguay. I don't think they saw at all the real Paraguay. The real Paraguay is going to show up in the World Cup. We're gonna be different in that stage, but we're getting the sense of it. And just looking into the three games, I think a lot of people feel like, okay, we might be favorites against Australia. Looking at that pot two, I think there was a lot of teams that a lot of people thought, okay, this team might be better than us as of right now, or they have more history in World Cups. But Australia, coming from that second part, I feel good, about this team because they don't have that much tradition. We never played against them in the World Cup. We used to see them in the way if we ever had an opportunity to play against them, like Uruguay did for a spot in the World Cup before. But ever since they went to Asia, it's been totally different for them. They took a different path. So it's going to be nice to see if they actually evolve to be a World Cup team that can actually get out of the group stage. For me, they've never been that team. So I see the U.S. and Paraguay clearly as the favorites in this group, right? And Paraguay needs to show it from that first game, guys. I love the order of of the teams that we're gonna play, because playing the US in that first game is gonna give them, they're gonna think that they're gonna have home advantage, and we're gonna try to take over from the strategy. Alfaro's definitely gonna be looking back at what this showdown that he had against Pochettino, two coaches that are gonna really go against each other with the strategy. I'm already thinking about what kind of players we might need in this group stage, especially if we look at the Europeans, very physical teams, guys. So I'm thinking, hey, maybe a couple of players that weren't in Alfaro's head as of right now, they come back to him because we might need them. Physical football might be needed, or really physical players, big players for that second match against the European team.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's certainly that feeling as well. Certainly there is that sense, and that was one of the things I thought of is like, Paraguay rising to the occasion. The whole world is really gonna really go for us. Obviously there's gonna be that sort of underdog feeling, which is crazy considering the US are, our host and aren't exactly the powerhouses of soccer historically. But I think there's gonna be a lot of people that will be siding for Paraguay just because it's the host country, and obviously the reputation of the US is different, but I think there is that feeling. I think certainly Paraguay don't typically get these sort of things going. I mean, they played co-host before. They played host before. They played Mexico in 1986, a huge important game. Famous goal from Romerito and Gato Fernandez, saving a penalty in front of Hugo Sanchez at the Azteca in the last second. So they have been able to do that, and yeah, I think also, Ralph, it's to see if they can break sort of history in the sense of winning a significant game in America. I think that's always been sort of the issue that, we even talked about for the friendly against the United States is that, they've looked so good in the qualifiers, playing at the Defensores and obviously getting the result that they could away. Now can they do it now in front of home soil and in front of a lot of fans? Like you said at SoFi, and then I'll playing at Santa Clara at Levi Stadium over the 49ers. Can they do that? Like you said, the US has a big following, but Australia, if we get a lot of Australian fans, we'll see who they get in among the playoff teams. But I think it's for them to sort of rise to the occasion. And I think as well, like, there is a lot of options for Paraguay, to qualify. And I think ultimately, I think you have to obviously start on the right foot. I mean, Paraguay, I'm not making an early impression prediction, but like you beat the United States in their first game on home soil. That's going to change a lot of perceptions, and I think that's going to make it even more interesting. But then you have to then play against Australia, and then I think that's the winnable game of the three, depending on who the European is. But you don't want to go into a situation where you feel you are chasing a result, and I think similar to what you said about when they took on the United States, when they took on Italy in 2010, a draw is fine, and then obviously getting the win against Australia, which I feel is maybe the weakest of the four, if I had to choose. I think that's where you have to feel as if though, okay, they have enough to qualify.
Yeah, and I think Fede made the point that when you get the hardest game out the way first, because what also you have to think about is like the timings of the games. I mean, this particular time, maybe they won't be physically in too bad a shape. Like when we had, for example, the Copa America coming off the back, and some of the players had to go to the Olympics. I remember like Paraguay, it felt like a lot of that team were fighting to get fit for that tournament, and then they lost all three games, which is a last experience of competitive football in the United States. But yeah, I think by having that first game against the US where you can afford not to win, you could tie that game, and then your big one against Australia, it kind of eases you into it, right, as well, and you're not having to fight. Hopefully, on that last game is doesn't become like a do or die that you have to win the match. Um, just an interesting stat I was looking up that both Pochettino and Popovich have scored against Paraguay as players. So there you go. The first two managers we play, and Pochettino only has two goals, right? And for Argentina, but one was at qualifier 2002 and Popovich was 2006. So Paraguay's played Australia 5 times and never won, which is an interesting stat. It's along with France, it's the side we played the most and never beaten them. So that's kind of interesting. But all 5 games were played in Australia, so it's going to be obviously very different being in California for a World Cup and not having to travel to Australia for friendlies. But I think yeah, to your point is like It's like everything's pointing in a good direction in terms of the logistics, in terms of the schedule of the games, and then you can target that second game that's the one you really have to win, which is also what Paraguay did at 2010, right? I think they had Italy, Dennis, they beat Slovakia, and they were able to tie New Zealand in that really boring last game, but they knew they were already through, so maybe we see something similar there. And I do think it's good for Alfaro that he gets to play Pochettino again because he's already sounded him out. There's one thing, the US team is going to be very different to the one that played in the friendly. They were missing lots of first team players. But where we really suffered, and we suffered the same thing against Japan in the first half of that game, is they were just very good at closing down the build-up. They were very strong, athletic in terms of pressing, and we couldn't find a way through them. Against Japan, we figured it out, right? And we got the goals in the second half. But against US, we didn't quite find that, we weren't quite able to click in terms of getting that working. I'm sure Alfaro has taken that and he'll be working on that ahead of the game. And Alfaro's kind of the coach that I would trust over, say, Pochettino, to be able to get things right and to outthink having played already once before. So I think in a way, this friendly defeat that we just had against the US is maybe a blessing in disguise, looking ahead to the fact we've got to play them again in the opener. But I mean, Roberto, you were already trying to throw out some predictions, but I want to put you on the spot because I do have the question for you. Like, do you want Paraguay to win? Do you want it to be a tie? Do you want it to be because you've got like mixed emotions having been born in
Yeah, no, this is really the nightmare scenario in
the
terms of what I'm suffering. And look, I like the Paraguay national team, I want the US to do well as well, but it's always that feeling. It's like, oh, if it's a World Cup final, who do you go for? It is a World Cup group stage match, so you can get a draw if need be, and that is the political. I'm gonna say it. I think, and even my honest opinion, I think they could get a draw because I feel like, all right, you get the winnable game in Australia. And I think I could fancy their chances against one of the European teams. I think any of the four, I think Paraguay, obviously Turkey's a good team. They have really good players. The same could be said for Romania, but I think Paraguay can feel as if though they have had, and this is the thing that I feel is very much important, Fede, is that, on two parts. One, Paraguay have already battle tested themselves against amongst the best in the world when they beat Argentina, when they beat Brazil, when they beat Uruguay, they snatched points against Ecuador and Uruguay. Those are the five that are going to the World Cup. I think so. I think when you also look at it from a historical standpoint, Paraguay have had tough groups beforehand. I go back to '98 when they were in a group with Spain, Nigeria, and Bulgaria. Those were three tough teams, and everyone thought, "Oh, Paraguay can't get out of it. It's the group of death." And then, just evolving in the sense of like they got Slovenia, South Africa, and Spain in 2002. 2006 obviously was unlucky. That was a really tough group because they had England, Sweden, and Trinidad and Tobago. We had two powerhouses of Europe. 2010, sort of a different factor. Italy, obviously, we didn't expect Italy to fall badly as they did, but it was also with Slovakia, one of those like mid-tier sort of European teams. I kind of feel that way with the ones that we're gonna get in 26, and then obviously New Zealand, which of course, New Zealand playing Oceania and Australia playing AFC, but it's kind of in that similar booth, even though Australia's a bit more better, I would say. But in any case, like I said, it could have been worse. I think there are groups out there. I don't know if you've been able to assess all of them. There's 12 of them, so it's a lot to go. But I think there could be more difficult groups to get into. Like I look at the Ecuador group, for example, that had Curacao, Germany, and Ivory Coast. Maybe you write off the Germany game from there. Or if you go to the group with Uruguay, you have Spain, Cape Verde, and Saudi Arabia. You probably write off the Spain group, the Spain game, because maybe that might be a losable game. Or, you go into the Colombia group with Portugal or a team from the ISC, from the Intercontinental Path. So this, from a really strict sort of quality and talent standpoint, I think this is one of the better groups that Paraguay could have had. It could have been easier. There are other groups that could have been better for them. And not even talking about logistically and where they travel. I think in terms of quality, I think people will be happy about this, but I stress this, and I'll be on the record on here. I think it's open for any of the teams to go in. We've seen what the USA can do, especially on home soil, and because they've had this World Cup pedigree. Australia, they're hit and miss sometimes. Sometimes they have a good World Cup. Sometimes they don't. They obviously shocked a lot of people in 22 when they got out of a group with Denmark and I forgot the last team, Tunisia and France. And they gave Argentina a good game in that last World Cup. And, they have that sort of pedigree of playing in there. And for the European teams, I mean, they have the experience as well. I mean, I don't believe any of them have been in recent World Cups. Like Kosovo's never been. Romania haven't been since '98. Turkey haven't been since 2002. Slovakia, like you said, Ralph, 2010. So you got some teams that haven't been in a major competition for quite some time. So yeah, I think when you mix in everything, Fede, I think ultimately, I think it's a good group. I mean, I guess I'll put you on the spot now. If you had to like grade this group or rate it out of 10, what would you say? Looking forward to it.
No, out of the opportunities that we had and out of the worst case scenarios, thinking about going against really hard teams, right? That the stake was going to be totally different. No, I would rate this an 8 out of 10. Out of the
Okay.
possibilities that we had. I love the group. I think it's very accessible. I think Paraguay should aim for the first spot, even. Just the way
Okay.
that it turned out. If we would have had to Europeans, if we would have had to go up against, I don't know, one of the world stars like Ronaldo with Portugal and really good team that they have, it would have been different, even for the players, right? I mean, for the coaching staff, they are the ones that have to face these guys. I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna go to sleep this night, having nightmares or thinking, okay, I gotta face this guy, I gotta go up against this one. No, no, I think they're thinking, okay, no, now it's down to us. It all depends on what we can do, and if we can produce what we've already seen in the qualifiers, I think it's doable. This group is doable, and I'm aiming for that first spot. And some people might say, no, but you're going up against the host, you're going up against the US. To think about that third spot, you can even qualify there. But no, I want that first spot, guys. I want a weak team also when we get out of the group phase. And I want to put the US on the spot in this group. I want to put them against the ropes. I want them to play for the second spot. I want us to get that win out of the way already in that first match and really show the world what we're capable. Hopefully, the guys, just like I said, the players, they're going tonight thinking about that spotlight, thinking about what they can do in that first match when the world is, when everybody's going to be watching, right? And so we can show the U.S. what the real football is, and you can stop calling it like that. And
So
hopefully,
Ralph, just going into that sort of thing, like, I'm looking at, like, obviously we're thinking ahead, but if Paraguay were to win this group, and this is actually an interesting thing, obviously we are pipe dreaming this a bit, but if they were to win the group, they would stay in Santa Clara, which is where they would have their the last two group stage game. Then they go to Seattle, then to Inglewood, then to Arlington, then to MetLife. So they would play potentially in the West Coast for 6 games out of 8 in the entire World Cup if they get that far. Um, we have to obviously who they can be because there's I think 5 different teams that could be in the third place spot. So I'm not even going to explain that because it's too complicated. If they finish runners up, if they finish runners up in Group D, they actually take on the runners up of Group G, and who is in Group G is Belgium, Egypt, Iran, and New Zealand. So all again, that those are also teams that are of similar quality, or maybe just a little bit better, but they're not like huge giants like Brazil or Germany, England, whatever. Um, if that were the case as well, then that would also open up a potential game in the round of 16 because looking at the other group, you have the winner of Group J, and then Group J is the Argentina group with Algeria, Austria, and Jordan. You would think, yeah, they're probably going to win that game. And then the runner-up of Group H, which has Uruguay, Spain, Cape Verde, and Saudi Arabia. You would probably fancy Uruguay finishing second. So there could be a case that there could be a South American affair in the round of 16 if they're able to beat one of the teams from the other group. And of course, it depends on the third place. Like, there's also those sort of things. I think there's 5 different combinations you can have with the winner, the winner, runners up, and then obviously the best third place team. But I think ultimately, when you look at it, I think a win and a draw, whoever it may be, would serve you right. But I agree with Fede. I think this group is so tight that maybe, it won't come down to who has more well, I shouldn't say that, but like I could see a situation where a lot of these teams could have the same points or maybe 1 point difference. Like it's not going to be like a team winning all 3 games. I don't personally see that. I think there's going to be some teams that there's going to get some draws, and I don't see a team being perfect. But if Paraguay have the chance of maybe a good goal difference or whatever, I think that can really allow them to strive for the group stage for the win of the group, and they could. I think for the first time in quite some time. I mean, obviously in 2010 it was the thing. But I think this is the first time, at least in recent World Cup history, and maybe Fede, you can back me up or whatever, that Paraguay have a really good chance of winning the group. It's not out of the question like it was maybe in 2010 because everyone was talking about Italy. '06 you had England and Sweden. '02 you had Spain. '98 you had Spain and Nigeria and all that. '86 you had Mexico being the host. Similar situation in 26. But this is not out of it wouldn't be out of the reality to say Paraguay can win this group and advance to the next round.
Yeah, I mean it's not crazy like you said, and the way you were describing if they win the group, the kind of route they get, that's the great thing about being with the hosts because obviously it's all set up to make it easy for the hosts. But if you knock them off and take that first spot, then you get the easy ride instead. I mean, I'm talking about easy in terms of the travel. I'm playing this up a lot, but it's a big thing because we saw it in Russia and we saw it in Brazil. The teams that traveled less usually ended up doing better because it just takes a lot out of you in this short time. Um, it's yeah, I mean the pressure's on. I guess the pressure is on the US for that first game. They're the ones that are the host. They have to do something. We've actually been talking a lot. Well, we've been maybe offline, but there's been a lot of pressure on Pochettino because they haven't really sparkled or done anything too impressive until recently. Maybe they picked up a bit of form, but there's nothing to say. Wow, this team's going to come in the World Cup and get to the quarterfinals like everybody's hoping. It's not uh, like a foregone conclusion. So maybe that first game, Paraguay puts the spanner in the works, and if they win that, it really puts them in the driving seat. Where you were saying, Roberto, like no one's going to win all three games. Yeah, that's probably true. So I don't know what we'll call this group. It's not. It's definitely not the group of death. It's not really a group of life. It's like almost the group of probably you get a second chance
Yeah,
because
group of second chances. I love
group
that.
of
I think
second chances.
there you
Yeah,
go.
maybe
We'll
we'll
label
we'll
it right
call it
there.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, Fede, I think, to close this off because it's nice stream and obviously we can go on for quite some time, but we can only do this for so long. I think as well, I think it's a good point Ralph said, like being a host country and being a favorite, it could be a lot. It could be a lot on a team. We saw that with Qatar last year. They got into a group with, it was a tough group, obviously, but with the Netherlands, Senegal, um, and it was like Ecuador. But we also saw it with teams like South Africa. They were the host, and they get a rematch of the opening game against Mexico. And also another team like Mexico who, are not doing so hot. There's also that pressure with Javier Aguirre, even for Jesse March for Canada. They're not exactly blowing everyone around. So that could come into our favor that, being a host country and, obviously there's so much expected on the US to make sure that this home World Cup is the best one that they can ever have. I don't think to win, obviously. I don't think that's something that they can realistically go for, but at least we can go and try to ruin the party and be, a bit different than the rest. And, I'm sure there's going to be people in the next 7 months that are, maybe not the smart US fans, but they're like just going in and they're trying to you say, oh, it's Paraguay, that no one really knows that they don't have big stars, we can easily win this. And the same but I think it works both ways. Like we need to respect everyone. I think ultimately that should be said for them, Australia, and whoever the European team is. But but it really feels as if though that, like Ralph said, the pressure really is on the US to do well. And they're the ones that need the 9 points. They're the ones that feel that way. I think that's their obligation in a way as a host country. But I don't see it like that, just straight through. If the World Cup started tomorrow with the best teams possible, I don't think we get a perfect record from any of these teams.
Yeah, we're gonna respect all three teams that we're gonna face in this group stage, right? But I mean, we're confident going into the World Cup after what we've seen in the qualifiers, after what we've seen from this team, the potential, how this group is handling themselves. Also, the bond between the guys, and just the way the team has evolved. And we know several of our players can stand out in a game like the one we're gonna have against the U.S. or in any other games in the World Cup. I'm really looking forward to how the guys are gonna head into the World Cup. And I'm talking about the base of players in that midfield. I'm talking about our strikers. I'm talking about our exciting players that can really do some magical things. I was looking at some of the flyers that were already out there, especially U.S. flyers, but people posting stuff on social media, and you're seeing a lot of Almiron, you're seeing a lot of Julio Enciso. They are kind of the face of the national team now, right? And we're going to see a lot of posters of them. We're going to see a lot of pictures of them as the U.S. starts promoting this first match of the World Cup for them. And I'm thinking just what they can do in a game like this, and I'm really excited about that because I see the potential in this group. I see our players. I see everything that they can do. We have defenders that are standing out also in Europe. I think it's just coming all together at the right moment. It's a very special feeling because we're back at the World Cup after so long. The guys want to do something now in the World Cup. It's not just about participating. It's not just about coming back. Now it's about earning the respect of the world. And I think we're really going to go into the World Cup with that mindset. I'm already hearing it from the players in different interviews. We want to be world champions, at least from the mentality is there, and that's the right way to do it. That's the right way to go into a tournament like this. It could be that kind of World Cup, guys. I mean, I just said it. It's a World Cup that's a lot bigger. It's going to have more teams, a lot of new teams, and we might see a lot of surprises also. Why not one of those surprises be Paraguay? I think a lot of journalists, a lot of people around the world are looking at this draw, and they're looking at this group and they're saying, nah, the next winner of the World Cup is not in this group, but hey, we might surprise a couple of big teams in this World Cup. We did it in the qualifiers, and I'm really confident about what's going to happen in a couple of months.
Just looking at the odds right now, plus 15,000 to win the World Cup right now. Similar on par with teams like South Korea, Austria, and so on. If I had to look at the group futures, I think and I'll go right here. Like the US are plus 130, 330 to win the group, actually. USA are plus 150. So, yeah, you got some, right there. The fact that people are thinking that US Paraguay are gonna do that and to qualify out of the group. Let me just double check. Minus 230. So there's already, there's money there that Paraguay should qualify. I think people are expecting that. And I think, yeah, I think I agree with Fede in saying, yeah, I think this group is an 8 out. I was leaning towards 7 out of 10, but then just thinking a bit more, I think I could boost it up to just an A, 8, 10, which is a B plus in my opinion. And Ralph, I mean, I'll get some final thoughts from you and you too, Fede, but just
Ralph
anything
looks
you want to
happy.
add.
I think he liked
Ralph
the
is
draw.
happy.
He
What
looks
about
happy.
England? What about England, man? How do you feel about England's group? We might as well ask you about
It,
that one.
well, England's got a very tough group, right? I mean,
Mm.
that was the one that I was worried we would get put in because England and Croatia came out first, and I was like, "Whoa, that means there's a big chance that we could get in there with the two Europeans." So that's a difficult group because also with I think, well, Panama England beat in the World Cup previously quite convincingly, but it's a better Panama team than before. In Ghana, you never really know what you're
They are
going to get,
tricky. They're
right?
tricky.
So
They have a lot of
they're
World Cup
they're always
pedigree.
tricky depending who turns up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not easy for the English. But going back to Paraguay, I think talking with you guys, I'm starting to feel better about this group. At the beginning, I was happy. I don't think it's going to be too tricky. But now I'm like, maybe we should just win the group and get out there, stay in Santa Clara. I mean, that's what we got to start doing, guys. We got to organize our trips to California. None of us are from there, so we're gonna have to get over there.
California dreaming. We're all California dreaming of the World Cup, aren't we, Fede?
I love that. I like that. I like that. That could be one of the slogans. People are starting to think that tonight everybody's thinking about California, thinking about the whole trip. People are saying, San Francisco could be the base. When we were talking about, hey, a lot of people might actually stay more in Miami in those first weeks, but I think a lot of people are now thinking going towards the other way. Oh, that looks
They're dreaming
beautiful,
about
Roberto.
this. They're dreaming about this.
With
Yeah,
with that jersey in the back, oh, you got me dreaming now.
Yeah, no, I've been seeing some photos as well of Alfaro with the World Cup trophy. A lot of things that are going on. I mean, no, there was a photo. I don't know if you guys saw it. There was like a photo last night of Alfaro right next to the World Cup trophy. It's like, who doesn't want to see that? Again, I think this whole thing, and we've been on live for almost an hour. Thank you for everyone that has been able to tune in and obviously enjoy this. But yeah, I think at the beginning of the show we felt a bit more pressured and like anxious in a way, but now we've kind of like spoke about it and at ease, and heads have cooled off a bit. That can happen because sometimes when you react instantly, you could say something that you don't mean, or it's like, oh my God, they're so tough. But I think thoroughly, and I think all the other three nations can feel the same way. is that they have a good chance. But I think when you compare Paraguay and what they had to go through in the last 2 years of the qualifiers, USA played friendlies, Australia were getting out of Asia, which is, it's tight, but it's not of the same par of quality that they get um, in compared to South America. And then obviously the European teams, like those are the more lesser of the teams in comparison to like, England, France, Portugal, Spain, etc. So yeah, I think ultimately it's happy vibes for all of us. And, obviously we are going to be California dreaming for the next 7 months of gearing up to that first game against the United States in SoFi on June 12th, right there. Everyone's going to be circling that calendar. That's going to be one of the most anticipated days for the United States and for Paraguay as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, anything to close, Ralph? Last thing that you want to say before we close it out here?
Come find us at the World Cup. We're gonna be
Yes.
here.
We'll be here. We'll be talking about Paraguay as we always do. We always talk about them for the next 7 months. We'll have to see what's going to happen. We obviously have some games in March as well. I'm sure we're going to try to get some friendlies of similar quality as well. We'll see who they get in that sense. And then yeah, we'll see. Fede, last thoughts. What do you want to close on after a really eventful day in DC?
I must say, guys, it felt like a special moment when I saw that the US was playing Paraguay because it kind of made sense with everything that we've been doing these last couple
It
of
felt
years,
like
with this
destiny.
podcast.
Did it feel like destiny? Did it, Fede? Did you really see yourself?
Obviously, we are the first ever podcast to talk about Paraguayan football in English. There might be other people doing content, obviously in English about
Yep.
Paraguayan football, and I love seeing that on social media. I think we're gonna see a lot more now that we're gonna play against the US. So it's gonna be great to be on that journey with our guys. So we're on this hype train, Ralph. We got several months, so we're gonna hype you up. We're gonna hype every Paraguayan that can support this team, and we're gonna try to grab a couple of people from California that are not Paraguayans, and we're gonna put them that jersey because we're gonna want them on the stands. Also, we're gonna need everybody that can support and cheer for this team in the World Cup that's coming up. It's gonna be very special. So we're on our way, guys. We're on our way.
Yeah, we're on our way, guys. Yes, we're off to the United
Go.
States. We're off out west to there. So yeah, obviously we're gonna close this out here. Thank you for everyone that tuning in. Obviously, thank you, Ralph and Fede, for joining me. As always, we'll obviously be doing another episode on Monday, where we talk about firstly what we saw in this group and overall as well. Maybe a bit more reaction from what other things. We have a weekend of games, so I'm sure maybe something will come up. Obviously, got to talk about Cerro Porteño winning the Clausura. They won their first Clausura in 4 years, and obviously got the Supercopa between them. I forgot the last name. I'm sorry, Ralph. You're gonna have to help me. Who do they play on the weekend?
General Caballero.
And El Caballero, because they won the Copa Paraguay. Yes, sorry. You get too much in the Abbey Rojo and like, oh wait, there's still other games going on. There is a game tomorrow, and we'll talk about that as we always do here on Guarani Vision as we close out another great show and a first ever live stream. Hopefully, we can do more of this for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Ham.